This is Back Roads of Illinois server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. We're glad you're here on the Markets Club podcast. The World Supply and Demand Report from the Department of Agriculture and these prices are currently unstable on the corn markets for fundamentals on right now. What is the importance of being able to trade to China? But it's still confused about this topic because there are a lot of uncertainty. I am joining with Brian Basting from Advanced Trading with his colleague Cesar Cruz and Bill Harvtape from 84 for Hedage and Cedar Rapids. This is the Markets Club podcast with Brian Basting and Cesar Cruz. Bill Harvtape today about the World Supply and Demand Report from USD. The World Supply and Demand Report from the Department of Agriculture and these prices are currently unstable on the corn markets for fundamentals on right now. What is the importance of being able to trade to China? But it's still confused about this topic because there are a lot of uncertainty. I am joining with Brian Basting from Advanced Trading with his colleague Cesar Cruz and Bill Harvtape from 84 for Hedage and Cedar Rapids. Hi, how are you guys? And I am glad that you guys are being here on today.
Good, Cesar. Everything's good.
Thanks, Cesar. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Cesar. All good here.
Okay, Brian and Bill. The World Supply and Demand Report was coming out for this morning. We know that it's a big report from USDA. However, what is your position on this report with the lower grains prices, Brian?
There's no other word to use, I believe, Cesar, than to say that the corn estimate from USDA today on the production side was a shocker. Not only was the yield increased from where it was back in November, the trade was expecting about a 2-bushel decline in the national average yield from that last survey-based estimate in November. However, the yield came in a 0.5 bushel higher than what it was in November. So not only did the yield increase from what it was in November, but also the harvested acreage increased about 1.2 million acres from what it was in November. Most of that acreage increase, Cesar, was seen in the Western Belt, as states such as Iowa, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas. Mixed yields in those states, but generally firmer, particularly in North Dakota, where the yield was 12 bushels higher than what it was in November. But the bottom line is when you add together the acreage increase and the yield increase, the production increase compared to what it was back in November was a shocker. It was up from 16.752 billion bushels to 17.02 billion bushels. So that's about 275 million bushels above what it was in November. But most importantly there, Cesar, is the trade was looking for a decrease. So relative to the average trade estimate, today's production estimate for corn was almost 470 million bushels higher than the average trade estimate. So just shy of a 500 million bushel. And it was 320 million bushels above the high end of the range. The highest end of the range was much below that. I believe it was 16 point. I don't have the number right in front of me, but it was well below that. And so 16.7 is what the high end of the range was. So bottom line on that, Cesar, was that the trade was just shocked by what that estimate was from USDA this time. Kind of the opposite of what it was last year at this time when the trade was shocked by a lower yield estimate and a lower production estimate, but not this year. This year, the carryout is increasing to 2.227 billion bushels. That's about 250 million bushels above what the average trade estimate was, and right at the top end of the range of the analyst estimates. The highest estimate was 2235. So just overwhelmed anything else in the report. Some modest increases in usage were seen by the USDA in feeding, but not near enough to offset that increase that we saw in the production estimate. So what we're left with is a market that was been shocked by the more than ample supply now carry out compared to what expectations were, and particularly compared to last year, Caesar. If we look at the corn estimate, just to wrap things up on corn, they carry out at 2227. Last year's carry out was 1551. That's almost a 44% increase in corn carry out from what it was last year. So the market is under some pressure, needless to say, today with that news.
How about you, Bill? Did you think that it was a shocker as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Brian did a pretty good job on his recap there. I was hoping he dug deep enough to find something bullish in those numbers today, but a little bit like myself, there just doesn't appear to be a whole lot there. That beginning supply at 18.597, that's the ending stocks from last year, coupled with the new production this year. Absolutely massive record beginning supply. We set records all over the place. If the numbers the USDA gave us today are true, it'll be the largest beginning supply in history. They're talking about the highest production in history, the highest yield in history, the highest usage in history. Brian touched on, they tried to help us a little bit on the feed use number. I have a problem with the 6.2 billion feed use number. That would be up 746 million bushels over what we used for feed use a year ago. There's only been 3 other instances in the last 25 years where feed use year over year jumped 500 million bushels or more. All 3 of those years were years after a production problem. Those were bounce back years where feed use was decreased because of a problem. And I'm afraid this 6.2 that the USDA, as I say, tried to help us with on an increase in demand is too high. And that's going to be subject to downward revision on future reports. But all in all, I'd have to agree with Brian. Extremely negative report. And we saw a good chunk of that factored into the market today.
Wait and see for the planting intention report on March. It will be great.
Yeah, in end of March, always we have the prospective planning reports. Numbers are interesting as we're helping clients start to look at possibilities for planning going forward. Soybeans just don't seem to work. Corn, I guess one of my clients put it best today. Corn looks like it loses less money. So count on big acres in corn. We're still going to plant some beans, but corn seems to be the lesser of the 2 evils as we look at the current situation, costs, and what the return is going to be on those 2 crops here in the Midwest.
Of course. Bill, the carryout to China after October. What is the main concern about the trade deal to them?
Yeah, well, I think the trade was pretty optimistic when those trade agreements were announced with China, that China was not only going to purchase the bushels that they committed to, but go far beyond that was maybe just a minimum. It appears to be that it's just going to be a minimum. And as we know in soybeans, in the first quarter of the marketing year, well over half, historically, well over half of the marketing year's exports happen in the first quarter of the year. We've fallen well behind that this year. Lack of that China business is very apparent, and it's going to be tough to pick up that business as we work into these last 3 marketing quarters here. So I don't expect, as the South American supplies come online, that we claw back a whole bunch of world market share in terms of the export picture.
Cesar, what is the beans demand in Brazil for right now?
Well, Cesar, and the beans in Brazil have been completely planted already. Very little to left actually as of last week with the CONAB report. And harvest has already started in Brazil. And so far, weather conditions have been good. Of course, there are areas in Brazil, some in South Brazil, some in Northeast Brazil, where they've been having some issues, but overall conditions are very good. And today, as an answer to this good weather condition in Brazil, the USDA increased Brazil production estimate by 3 million metric tons, now estimated at 178. Was kind of close to the high range of the trade estimate of 175, 178, 79. And not only that, like Bill was highlighting how hard it's going to be for the US to export beans this year due to very high competition coming from South America, not only from Brazil, but also from Argentina. The USDA also increased Brazil projections for exports by 1.5 million metric tons, now 114, which is also a record. They also increased Brazil's crushing and consumption as a result, but since Brazil and Argentina are going to be very competitive for the rest of the year through September, it's going to be very hard to compete with such a big crop in Brazil. Conditions have been good. The USDA increased both yield and area this today, and I think it's going to be a very good crop for our Brazilian mates out there this year. When Brazil harvests their beans, they are going to plant their second corn also. Since beans have been harvested already, are also seeing some second corn planting in Paraná State, South Brazil, and in Mato Grosso also. Mato Grosso started at a very fast pace last year planting. And of course, they're going to start planting their second corn crop also at a fast pace, but their ideal window closes by the third week of February. So we're going to have to keep watching the weather in South America. In Argentina, planting is at 90%, nearly 90% complete, and they're going to start harvesting those beans only late February, early March, sorry. So there is a long ways to go for Argentina. We need to keep our eyes open for what weather is going to tell producers in Argentina and in Brazil for the remaining next month or so.
Cesar Cruz is an agricultural economist for advanced trading, and he studied in the agricultural in Brazil. We were talking about the planting season and harvest in Brazil with him before on the show. Cesar, we saw the beans yields trends for Brazil from last week. However, we're not getting any news about Southern Hemisphere with their beans. Could you tell our audience about their responses to the beans for Brazil?
Of course, yeah. So as I said before, the USDA increased Brazil yield estimate today, and not only yield but also area for their beans. And so far, I think there have been very good conditions all over Brazil. There are some areas they're having some challenges. There were some replanting in some areas in Mato Grosso, in northeast Brazil, in the Mato Piba region. But overall conditions have been very good. That translated to a 3 million metric ton increase in production estimate today for Brazil in the January WASDE. So since with the beans almost nearly complete planting, we're going to start seeing now results for yields. But the USDA is very optimistic, has some optimism about the bean production in Brazil this for the 25-26 crop year.
How about in Argentina?
Argentina, they are close to 90% complete, the planting season in Argentina. The early planting beans are near complete, but they still have to watch for the weather in the coming weeks and months. They're going to start harvesting those beans only early March. So we need to keep watching what's going to happen in Argentina. Something interesting about Argentina that's well also have to watch is that Argentina cut some of their export taxes for various products, including beans and oil and meal. With a decent crop in Argentina, with reduced export tariffs, they're going to probably be more competitive this year, especially exporting to destinations that are we also export. So something to watch in Argentina also, how those beans are going to develop in the coming weeks and months.
Of course. Do you recommend within the premium risk on these prices, Brian?
I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question, Cesar?
Do you recommend within the premium risk on these prices, Brian?
I think the message that I would share with producers at this point, Cesar, is to maintain market flexibility. You want to have a floor underneath these markets, obviously, and you want to maintain flexibility if you sold bushels, because we still got part of the growing season left, particularly the growing season for corn in Brazil. As Cesar said, they won't even plant the safrinha crop until later this month and throughout the month of February. So there is still a weather market possibility there for corn, and there's still a weather market possibility, as Bill said, with looking at Argentina from the standpoint of those crops aren't made yet either, and also more so to Bill's point, with the planting intentions report coming up, that's always a wild card in terms of what those numbers will show us. My main point is that we want to leave the upside open. We want to have a floor from a producer standpoint, but right now the option premiums, the historical option volatility, Cesar, on options is quite low. So for a producer, I don't know what it is after today, but it was low going into the report. But it was quite low for example, if a producer wanted to purchase a call option to buy back, as it were, some previous sales, that would be relatively historically inexpensive to do that. But my main point as I wrap up my thoughts there would be to maintain market flexibility, keep a floor, maintain a floor underneath 2025 bushels and 2026 expected bushels for that matter, but leave the upside open because there's still quite a bit of growing season left in Brazil, for example, with the safrinha crop that will be planted here. And then we have of course, our entire northern hemisphere growing season, not only here in the U.S., but also in Europe and Ukraine and Russia. So I think that's the message I would share today.
Yeah, and I might jump in on that too, Brian and Cesar, that with this recent sell-off, volatility is low. This is going to cause a lot of producers to pucker up on sales, and that's just the initial reaction we get after a market move like this. So sales could dramatically slow down. Basis levels, we had a nice surge, at least here in the Western Corn Belt, a nice surge in basis 6 or so weeks ago on lack of movement. We could very possibly see the farmer pucker up again here on this sell-off, squeeze those basis levels back in. Storing corn in the physical sense is extremely expensive and inefficient way to speculate on a higher market. So if you've got your mind made up, I'm going to store corn one way or another, keep an eye out over the next 2-3 weeks. This basis could narrow in, give an opportunity to set that basis by moving the physical bushels, coming back. If volatility stay low on these options, as Brian pointed out, may give you an opportunity to come in, buy a call option, replace cash sales with a cheap call. That limits your downside risk, keeps the top side open, set your option out there that gets you out into the middle of the summer, maybe a July or some sort of August or September call option. In the event that we would get a weather problem, it leaves the top side open, limits your downside risk. And I just recommend you keep an eye out for basis tightening up here over the next couple of weeks.
Finally, what is your thoughts on the biofuel demand for soybean, Brian?
The biofuel demand is a bright spot, Cesar, for the soybean market. It has been well documented about the expansion in soybean processing that we've seen the last few years. For example, today's USDA report forecasts the crush for soybeans here in the U.S. at 2.57 billion bushel. It's up 15 million bushel from last month, and it's up about 125 million bushels from last year, and it's up about 285 million bushels from what it was just 2 years ago. So that's definitely a bright spot. I think it's going to continue to be a bright spot moving forward, domestic demand for soybeans. So I think that's something that we can look forward to as we move into the 26 calendar year and hopefully beyond the 27 and beyond. The challenge there, I just remind your listeners, Cesar, is that the export side with Cesar did a terrific job highlighting the magnitude of the Brazilian crop and their export potential. It certainly feels like that there's still room for growth in acreage down in Brazil. We've seen the acreage here in the U.S. combined corn and soybean acreage, for all intents and purposes, peak out at about 180 million acres, plus or minus, depending on the year. Whereas we continue to see expansion, and Cesar could speak to it far better than I could, but in places such as Mato Piba and northeast, Para in the north, and still expanding some in Mato Grosso. So the point is that yes, we're optimistic that the domestic use of beans here in the U.S. is strong, and we'll continue to be optimistic about that. But we just got to be cautious about our export potential because of the competition from not only Brazil, but also add Argentina, South America.
Thanks, you guys, for your time today. I enjoyed your visit.
Thanks for having us, Cesar.
Yep. Thank you, Cesar. Have a great day.
Thank you, Cesar. Happy to be here again with you. Have a great day.
Do you have any questions about your marketing questions? You have to go to their respective websites or emailing to them. This is Back Roads of Illinois. I am Cesar Delgado. You have a great day.